If you've never done it before, building a PC can be a daunting prospect. You don't know what parts you need, the way the wires connect, or how to deal with hardware bugs. Thankfully in Yu-Gi-Oh, these bugs are actually a benefit as they slot themselves into place to make building incredibly easy. Just instead of a PC, you're making a deck instead. But for as helpful as these bugs are, the planned obsolescence of power creep has left these binary beasties gathering cobwebs, as newer, more powerful parts have taken their place just so players can keep up with the modern games. And that's why they're the subject of today's video, where we wonder if digital bugs ever had or will ever have windows of opportunity, its potential lines, as well as what it might need to become the apple of our eyes. Digital bugs are a series of level 3 light insect monsters with a couple of common themes that tie the deck together into a workable strategy. The first is that every main deck monster has an effect that will either change a monster to defense position for a positive effect, or an effect that will activate when they're changed to defense mode. Either way, these effects are actually quite good, at least in a vacuum, because they usually translate into extension. This should allow for you to easily summon out an XCs of choice, which would allow for them to work well with their secondary component. Every main deck digital bug also provides a battle phase focus bonus whenever they're used on field as a material for an XC summon, which can turn even your weakest options into powerhouses if you ever get the chance to declare an attack. And lastly, the deck's surprisingly versatile XCs options have an alternative summoning condition, which lets you rise through their ranks to summon out whichever XCs you could need for the circumstance you're facing on top of one of your lower ranked XCs by detaching 2 materials from them. When you piece these 3 themes together, the concept behind the deck becomes clear. By using the first effects to switch your monsters to defense position, you'll get the chance to use them to swarm the field with a bunch of bugs. Then you'll be able to use these bodies to overlay into a Scaradiator that'll be souped up with the effects that it'll have inherited from whatever digital bugs you use to summon it. And from there, you can decide whether you want to keep Scaradiator for its negate, or if the situation calls for you to rank up into Corbage for its removal, or even further into Rhinocebus for its interaction. The game plan seems so simple that it should be foolproof to make a deck around it, especially because we've seen a number of different strategies over the years do well with similar ideas behind them, but something definitely short-circuited when designing digital bugs, as these parts were fried even before they were released. The first issue lies within the shell of the main deck, the monsters. You see, prior to the deck's most recent support in Registrider, it was actually quite difficult to fill up your field with digital bugs using your main engine, and required a specific 2 to 3 card combo to get your deck moving at a reasonable pace, which is compounded by the fact that all of the back row designed to help with the deck requires you to already have the ability to play to be useful. With Registrider's release, this is a little bit less of an issue by giving you more potential 2-card combos. But there's only so much one extra extender can do to remedy an issue that's ingrained within these insects. Even if you somehow find a deck-solving strategy to summon out a bunch of these bugs, you'll encounter the deck's next big issue. Your digital bugs can only be used as an XCs material for insect monsters specifically. Thankfully, with the advent of links, you'll always have something to do with your bodies, but the scope of what you'll do with XC summoning will always be limited to this tight restriction. Add on to the fact that your range of XCs includes specifically level 3, level 5, and level 7 on a good day, then you only have level 7 options available to your entire XCs pool. This is made even worse by the deck's third issue. Summoning rank 5 and rank 7 monsters is too difficult to be worth it in a lot of cases. The XCs being able to rank up on insects is cool in theory for giving you constant access to them, but fails in that requiring you to detach 2 XCs material to summon them out can severely limit their function or access, and the deck's other ways of bringing them out are just too few and far between. All of this isn't to say that digital bugs are an entirely unsalvageable strategy. On the contrary, some of these cards deliver on the utility well enough that they'll occasionally be considered for insect-focused strategies. And in some slower formats, such as Duel Links, cards like Rhinocebus absolutely dominated the metagame for a while. Though generally, over in the TCG, these techno-terrestrials haven't gotten to see the top of the food chain. You can definitely meld your main deck cards with other insect decks, but often, the gimmick of digital bugs is a little bit too focused to mesh cleanly, which makes them a bit of a burden in a deck like B-Trooper. Instead, if digital bugs see prominence within the next couple of years without any direct support, it'll likely be due to its extra deck monsters, which have decently strong effects, but are generally held back by their summoning conditions. If you want to summon them normally, you'll need extremely specific materials, and while their rank up is a little bit more generic, there's not many good XCs for you to use as a bridge that are worth summoning above something else. The deck's hardware definitely needs an upgrade, but its core components and payoffs have a lot of potential. So let's see if a future version of Digital Bugs might be capable of running Crisis, or if they're doomed forever. Like we talked about earlier, main deck Digital Bug monsters share a lot of common traits between each other. They're all level 3 light insects, share a restriction that prevents them from being used on field for Xyz materials for anything but an insect, and give whatever monster you manage to summon with them an extra effect that's good in the battle phase. Likewise, these monsters all have effects that can allow for extension that either can change a monster to defense position, or for the Digital Bug in question to be changed to defense mode to trigger. It's this effect that usually is the difference maker between your bugs. Digital Bug Centibit, for example, has the strongest potential effect out of every Digital Bug, as if you get the chance to trigger it, you'll be able to summon out any level 3 insect monster from your deck in defense position, but comes at the cost of being one of the more difficult Digital Bugs to activate because it requires that it's changed from attack to defense position to activate in the first place. The implication with this effect is that you can use it to bring out another Digital Bug to access your Xyz monsters. However, the reason why it has some real prospects behind it is that it can summon out any level 3 insect in the game, and there's some pretty good ones in the pool. You might not be able to bring out your Xyz since most of these choices aren't light, but with the likes of Gokipole and Transcicada can be great for getting out extra insect bodies you can use for link plays, or some of the decent Xyz you can summon like Cicada King. Or if you're more focused on Digital Bug deck, the likes of Dream Cicada can help shift your monsters to defense mode so you can use their effects. And because of this generic nature, Centibit can cross over between more modern archetypes and cards to give Digital Bugs more of a fighting chance in the modern era. Take Bee Trooper as an example. It can supplement just about any insect strategy, but with Centibit, you can grab some of the best Bee Troopers from the deck even if you didn't start with them, netting you quite a bit of advantage depending on the choice. You're not just limited to Bee Trooper either. Centibit also allows greater synergy with Ragnarika, as you can natively place Samurai Beetle as a level 3 light insect that's great to draw due to its extension, and great to have in deck as a choice to summon from Centibit, because not only is it a light insect that you can use to summon Scaradiator, but you can also have the option of accessing your Ragnarika Link monsters, which will then allow you to use Samurai Beetle's graveyard effect and push even further. All of this is to say, Centibit can do a lot given the right opportunity, but unfortunately, you really have to force this effect to get any use out of it. It's far from impossible to do. On the contrary, Digital Bug Registrider and Dream Cicada are a perfect complement to Centibit, but without them, you need to get Centibit on field in attack position alongside a Web Solder or a Cocoon Denser that has yet to use their effects, which is strangely difficult to do because of the way these bugs extend is by using these effects to get each other on the field, making for some weirdly paradoxical lines of plays at time. If that's off the table, then you might need to force cards like Stumbling into your list to ensure that your main starter is online. But in doing that, you'll end up locking yourself out of some of your other effects that need a monster in attack position to work. It's a lose-lose scenario no matter what you do. It's awkward, but this effect really has something behind it. And as more strong level 3 insects get released, there might come a day where Centibit turns into a legitimate strategy for more than just Digital Bugs. But as of right now, it's a struggle to use. But if you get the chance, it's a great card. And its bonus inherited effect, where it allows Xyz monsters summon with it to inflict piercing battle damage, can even help you end games in a pinch. Centibit isn't alone with having this awkward activation though, as the same condition is attached to Digital Bug Ladybug. When Ladybug is switched from attack position to defense position, it can search for any level 3 insect, which, like Centibit, can open the door to better synergy with other decks, or can just be used as a consistency tool for Digital Bugs. Now, because Ladybug's effect is a little weaker compared to its sibling, the pool of good insects to pair it with is a little tighter. Samurai Beetle is still an okay option as it can summon itself from your hand with the right conditions. Flying Sea could be genuinely useful as a hand trap to search. And of course, if you have yet to use your normal, all your Digital Bugs are on the table. With that being said, Ladybug's effect isn't really worth the hoops you have to jump through, at least in comparison to Centibit. The easiest extender you can find is Battle Wasp Twin Bow the Attacker, but it isn't light, so you can't go for your archetypal rank 3, and something like a Samurai Beetle needs setup to be used in hand. Even Ladybug's unique utility of searching cards with in-hand use like Flying Sea and Marionette Might isn't the best, as all of these options are really niche, and would require specific formats and situations to truly be reliable. The main thing holding Ladybug back is its activation condition, much like Centibit, but is made worse because you get less reward for overcoming this hurdle. But there are some cute ideas behind this card, and if more cards are printed that work well with this effect, the scales could end up tipping in its favor. But right now, it's definitely not a favorable way to start off a turn. There is a small light at the end of the tunnel for Ladybug though. It's the digital bug that gives the best inherited effect through XC summon, as whenever the monster that used it as an on-field material destroys a monster by battle, you get to draw a card for free, which is just straight up a great bonus to have, allowing you to replenish your hand a little bit after the effort you went through to bring out an XCs. Thankfully, there are a couple of main deck digital bugs that have some easier activation conditions, but are still sometimes difficult to use because of the setup they require. Digital Bug Web Solder and Cocoon Denser are two digital bugs that, in order to activate their unique effects, need a monster you control that they can change from attack to defense position, and that includes themselves if you happen to normal summon them, and then this will allow you to special summon a level 3 insect from a particular location in defense position. For Web Solder, you get to special summon one from your hand, while Cocoon Denser will summon out a monster from your graveyard. And even though these cards are easier to use in their technical sense, the fact that you need level 3 insects in specific locations can make things dicey, especially in the case of Cocoon Denser, which is virtually useless in an early duel unless you find a way to foolish something. For a lot of archetypes, effects like these would be a genuine boon, and there's a lot of potential for these extenders in future, more supported versions of digital bugs. Because the more accessible these cards are, the better they can be, with Web Solder being an okay way to start a turn, and Cocoon Denser as a card you want to commit to the field when you know you can get value out of it. But as of right now, this highlights another core issue with digital bugs. It has a limited number of ways to get to its best potential tools. Centibit, Web Solder, and Cocoon Denser themselves can all help bring out other insects, but there's no way of finding these cards other than through Centibit's effect to get them on the field, or Ladybug's effect, which would be pointless to do in most situations, as Ladybug usually requires your normal summon to use, so you have no way of committing what you find. What makes this even worse is that it's somewhat difficult to use these effects one after another, specifically because most ways that digital bugs extend do so by summoning each other in defense position. This doesn't sound bad at first, but let's say you have Cocoon Denser on your side of the field, a Web Solder in grave, and a Centibit in hand. By using Cocoon Denser to bring back Web Solder, both of the monsters on your side of the field will now be in defense mode, preventing you from using Web Solder to summon out Centibit from hand. And even if you did have the spare monster to change, Web Solder summons Centibit in defense position automatically, preventing you from using this effect from the get-go. Thankfully, something like Registrator helps with this issue, as after using it with Centibit to bring out something from the deck, if you summon it in attack position, you'll be able to at least push a little bit further with your effects. But in any 2-card combo without Registrator or Dream Cicada, this sucks, plain and simple, as it prevents some of your best effects from comboing with one another. At the very least though, Web Solder is another okay way to start off your turn, depending on the cards in your hand. Cocoon Denser can come in clutch later on in a duel, and while their bonus effects aren't game-winning in the slightest, they can help if you've managed to supercharge the XCs you summon with other effects to make them a threat. Now, we've touched on the idea that most of the 2-card combos digital bugs have available are quite specific, lead to mediocre payoff, or in most cases, both at the same time. However, there's a semi-recent piece of digital bug support that attempted to solve the issue, and in some regards is quite successful, but ultimately didn't end up catapulting the archetype into the stars of meta play, that being Digital Bug Registrator. Registrator is the most unique of the main deck digital bugs, as its effect doesn't require to be changed to defense position to activate, nor does it need to change a monster's position. It actually triggers whenever you normal summon any level 3 insect monster, which then allows you to special summon it from your hand and then change the levels of Registrator and the monster you normal summoned to either level 5 or 7. That's not all either, as whenever Registrator is special summoned from your hand, you get a chance to alter the battle position of one insect you control. At the time of its release, Registrator seemed like a custom card for the deck. In an archetype full of monsters that usually require you to give up your normal summon, having an extender like this is already a plus, as it guarantees you access to an XCs if you had any other digital bug in your deck to go alongside it. Even better than that though, it's by far the smoothest way of triggering Centibit, as this 2-card combo can end up netting you a ton of bodies depending on your Centibit choice, letting digital bugs push past its previous limitations with a surprising amount of finesse. It doesn't even stop there though, because a cool part about Registrider is that, unlike every other digital bug, it gives you a wider array of potential options by letting you choose if you'd rather have them remain level 3 or become level 5 or 7. Now, this only opens up 2 generic XCs to summon out, and neither of these are all that useful. But what it does enable is for you to summon out Rhinocebus or Corbage more easily without relying on their alternative summoning conditions. Said conditions might make this seem like a pointless endeavor, but every time you rank up into an Insect XCs, you're losing out on 2 materials, which will either prevent a full climb all the way up to Rhinocebus from rank 3, or make it so you'll struggle to use their effects, which would require you to have materials to detach. Even more though is that Registrider actually allows for Rhinocebus and Corbage to take advantage of the inherited effects of the digital bugs. You see, unlike a deck like Zodiac, which gives their effects whenever they're XCs materials no matter what, the digital bugs only pass down their effects specifically when they're used as on-field material. And as soon as you rank them into a different XCs, even if you get transferred materials, you lose out on whatever boost you were promised. These effects are rarely going to be the reason you end up winning a duel due to how focused they are on the battle phase. But it's a huge shame that you have to give them up if you want to rank up, given that that's the whole gimmick of digital bugs. It's a strange conflict of interest, and it's great that Registrider can solve this issue. It's just really weird that it's baked into the deck in the first place. By all accounts, Registrider is an amazing card for the deck. But even with it around, Digital Bug is far, far from any kind of competitive success. You have to draw it for the archetype to resemble a function, as it's not only tough to find it later in a turn using archetypal tools, but even if you do, you'll have likely given up your normal summon to do so, which keeps it stuck in hand or forces you to run down a specific line with Armor Horn to normal summon another insect and then trigger its effect. And even in cases where you draw it, Digital Bug's core issue still persists. The restrictions mean that you're limited in the payoffs you have access to, so even your highest ceiling boards don't look too pretty. And the deck still has consistency issues because if you don't have Centibit with Registrider, you're never going to get those high ceiling boards in the first place. So after looking at the main engine pieces, we have an archetype with some crazy heavy restrictions limiting you to a specific pool of monsters, whose effects don't intuitively meld with one another, and doesn't even seem suited for the pace of the game in 2014, let alone 2025. Theoretically, this can be fixed if the deck had a flurry of workable back row at its disposal. We've seen plenty of strategies over the years with mediocre monsters bounce back because of brilliant set spell and trap cards. But unfortunately, just like the monsters, the back row that was intended for digital bugs leaves a lot to be desired. The best of the bunch by far is Bug Signal, which, while not a digital bug in name, acts as a rank up magic for an archetype by allowing you to target an Insect XCs and summon out another Insect XCs that's exactly 2 ranks higher or lower than the one you selected, and all of the XCs materials that monster had get transferred to the monster you summon. The intent behind this quick play spell is obvious. You can use it to switch between the digital bug boss monster on demand, either after you've spent the effect of one, or so that you don't have to waste materials ranking up. Even better though is that you're not stuck in just summoning digital bugs, as it can be used to summon any Insect XCs, at least in theory. But of course, like any card associated with digital bug, it has issues holding it back. Bug Signal being so unsearchable means that it doesn't mesh well in a deck that already needs multiple specific cards to combo. A signal will just be another dead card if you don't draw an appropriate extender, since it needs an XCs to function. And its utility, while cute, isn't really revolutionary for a digital bug. A deck that can already rank up with relative ease without Signal backing it up. Now, you could also try to force Signal in a non-digital bug deck since it technically is generic and usable with any Insect XCs, but the ranks of the current available Insect XCs are a little all over the place, so it's hard to rank up or rank down into anything useful, with the best options available being the digital bug XCs themselves, which you can bring out on top of any Insect XCs anyway. There's definitely a world where Bug Signal ends up being a strong part of an Insect deck one day. The card has potential, and if it were a little searchable, or there were more Insect XCs to take advantage of, it could become a must-play card. But currently, it can't do much for any strategy, digital bug or not. While Bug Signal is a card with potential, Bug Emergency is one that would need a lot to be functional, let alone good. Emergency is a normal trap that lets you target 2 level 3 insects in your graveyard and reborn them with their effects negated, and that's it. It's really unfortunate this effect is tied to a trap card, because if it wasn't, Emergency would be an incredible card. Netting you 2 monsters from your graveyard is undoubtedly a good effect by giving you a way to instantly summon out a rank 3 of choice. Though if you choose to summon out digital bugs, you'll still be limited to insects as their conditions apply even when they're negated. Unfortunately, Bug Emergency is a trap card no matter how hard we hope. And because of that, this effect goes from great to not having enough impact to justify how slow it'll end up making your setup. You have to set the card, pass, and wait for your opponent's turn to be over. But in doing so, you give your opponent an entire turn to set up, or end the game while one of your set cards is stuck doing nothing to stop them. Maybe if Emergency had a slightly better graveyard effect, it would be justifiable, but it's pretty awful as all it does is allow you to banish itself at an Xyz monster, so that all level 3 insect type monsters you control become the level equivalent to that monster's rank, but prevents you from special summoning anything that isn't an insect for the rest of the turn. The insect lock status, though thankfully, doesn't matter much for digital bugs. But what's really annoying about this effect is that it doesn't do anything to swing the tide of the duel in your favor for the absurd amount of setup it needs. It doesn't net you any advantage, it doesn't act as interaction, all it does is make summoning one of your higher ranked boss monsters on a later turn a little easier. And even then, your choice of which is limited by what's in your grave, which in some cases might end up being nothing. But for as bad as Bug Emergency is, it's technically something that could help out if you bring the game down to a snail's pace, which is more than can be said for Bug Matrix. Because all Bug Matrix is a field spell that, on a hard once per turn, lets you attach an insect monster from your hand to an insect as a material, while also providing a 300 attack and defense buff to all insects you control. This buff is basically nothing. All of your main deck digital bugs have bad attack stats that aren't made any better by such a small boost. And while it makes your Xyz more of a threat, it's not by much more, especially because now you have Registrator, which pushes these Xyz well past the usual threshold that boss monsters have 3000 attack. But this attack gain is the best part of this effect, as the other half is asking you to minus yourself to give your Xyz more ammunition, which might have been a cute way to end a duel if digital bugs passed down their effects wherever they were attached no matter what. But because of the way they're worded, they would just be a vanilla material. So far, we've dug into a lot of why main deck portions of digital bugs has had a pretty abysmal competitive life. There's potential there, at least within the monsters, because their effects are fine even for the standards of the modern era. But it's clear that when the deck was initially being designed, they were undertuned with a ton of weird restrictions, caveats, and drawbacks which ensured that they were never usable. And it really makes you wonder why Konami felt the urge to hold them back this much. Well, the answer likely lies in the fact that the potential payoffs for digital bugs are actually really strong, especially for the standards at the time of their release. Take Scare Radiator for example. It's the easiest of the digital bugs to summon since it requires no tricks on summoning conditions, and the moment you bring it out, you're rewarded with an archetypal infinite impermanence that'll also change the battle position of the monster you target for the cost of 2 Xyz materials. And you can even reload it by using it to destroy a monster by battle once per turn, as the moment it's sent to the graveyard, you can attach said monster to Scare Radiator as an Xyz material. With a measly 1800 attack, this seems less than reliable at first, but once you start considering all of the potential bonuses from the likes of Registrator and Web Solder, it's an incredibly simple task to accomplish. But of course, the best aspect to Scare Radiator is its negate. It's a simple effect, but it revels in that simplicity as it's an easy to use negate on par with the likes of Effect Veiler or Breakthrough Skill. All of these are old and simple cards made for a format from a decade ago, but they can just as easily be useful today in stopping an opponent's starter, blocking off an on-field extender, or even preventing the best boss monsters from utilizing their effects. In fact, Scare Radiator can even be seen as a little bit stronger than these cards, because as well as negating the threat of an effect, if you switch an opponent's monster to defense mode, you're also neutralizing the threat of a potential attack, which also allows you to more easily beat over that monster on the following turn, which would just so happen net you some extra material too. There's no doubt, Scare Radiator is a great card. However, it shares a problem with the main deck digital bugs, which also further exacerbates its issues. In order to summon Scare Radiator, you need to commit 2 level 3 light insect monsters to the field. And unfortunately, this drastically limits the number of decks that can actually summon the card to almost just digital bugs, as there are exactly 10 light insects currently in the game, with half of them being members of this archetype. And of the 5 left, the only ones that make reaching Scare Radiator easier are Galaxy Worm, which can act as a 1-card way to scare Radiator if you give up your normal summon, and Ragnarika Samurai Beetle, which can be an extender in the right circumstance. And this is a tough break for the card, as there's actually another insect rank 3 that has superseded its role, as the relatively recently released number 3 Cicada King has virtually the same effect, but is way easier to get to, as it can be summoned with any 2 level 3 monsters. So now, even if your deck could take advantage of Scare Radiator, you'll likely have an easier time with Cicada King's more generic summoning conditions instead. In comparison, Scare Radiator is just too tough to summon outside of its home archetype for as great as it is. But interestingly enough, the issue is not something that persists within the other digital bug XCs, because while Corbage and Rhinocebus require light insects of their rank to summon normally, they both have an alternative summoning condition. Corbage is able to rank up on any rank 3 or 4 insect by detaching 2 materials from it, while Rhinocebus can do the same but for rank 5 or rank 6 insects. This is vital for the usability, not just because there's almost 0 level 5 and level 7 light insects, but it means that you can play either of them in any strategy that's capable of making a generic insect XCs, which is awesome. So why haven't they seen competitive success? Well, for Corbage, ultimately their effect is only okay. It's a soft once per turn piece of removal that can only target defense position monsters your opponent controls and shuffles them into the deck, while its secondary effect lets you attach an insect monster from grave to it as an XCs material whenever the battle position of a monster changes. Don't get it twisted, a piece of removal like this can be solid enough even after the advent of links, as you'll still see players summoning in defense mode for one reason or another. And in digital bugs specifically, it pairs great when summoned using Web Solder as a material, as it'll allow you to trigger the second effect to attach an insect monster and prime your opponent's monster to be targeted with Corbage's non-destruction removal. However, without Web Solder, and when used generically, Corbage is unwieldy and prays that your opponent stumbles their way into a defense position monster. And if you're looking for a rank 5 insect specifically, is ultimately outclassed by Insector Exostag, which also has a piece of non-destruction removal that can be used on any monster, links included, which makes it a far more reliable tool in comparison. The one thing that Corbage has over Exostag though is its rank up, allowing it to be used in decks making rank 3s or 4 insects, which can definitely come in clutch in the right circumstances, but is too gimmicky to really be worth the extra deck slot outside of Duel Links. Partially, this is because of how specific Corbage's effect is, but it's also because its alternative summon condition actually requires a decent chunk of investment. You see, one of the core ideas baked into XC's monsters is that their materials serve as ammunition for their effects, forcing you to detach them as a cost. This isn't true 100% of the time, but it's a good rule of thumb. And it just so happens that all of the insects that Corbage can rank up on need to detach a material to get their best effects. And if you do that after summoning them with 2 monsters, then they'll only possess a single material and won't have enough to detach for Corbage's summon. So you don't get to do anything cool by linking these effects one after another to gain more advantage. If you want even the chance to summon Corbage, you have to give up on using the effects of the monsters you're ranking him on top of, which just isn't worth it most of the time for how niche it is, especially because the rank 4 insect pool already has ways of dealing with on-field threats that are a little less niche. Rhinocebus has some of the same summoning issues as Corbage. Whatever you use to summon it on isn't going to be able to do much, but in contrast, it's seen way more competitive success than either of its compatriots, at least in Duel Links. The reason why is simple. While Corbage's effect is fine, it's not worth extending into most of the time and giving up a potentially useful XCs. Rhinocebus, on the other hand, doesn't just have a good effect, it's a great one. It automatically inflicts piercing battle damage to a defense position monster your opponent has, but the real meat and potatoes of the card is that, at quick effect speed, by detaching a material, you get to pop an opponent's monster your opponent controls with the highest defense stat. This is excellent. It's interaction and removal bundled into one. In fact, if you stare at Rhinocebus for long enough, you might end up confusing Digital Bug with Zodiac, as it stands proud as the deck's very own version of Trident years before Trident came out. Albeit, it's definitely worse in that you don't get to choose the monster you pop with its effect, but it is still a solid way to remove your opponent's combo pieces nonetheless. And this effect means that potentially skipping out on a rank 5 or 6 insects effect to take advantage of it is more than worth the price of admission. Doubly so because the rank 5 and 6 pool of insects is a lot lighter, with just Corbage, Insector Exostag, and Insector Exobeetle making up your only rank up options. Corbage is only really good for digital bug decks. Insector Exostag means that any insect deck, such as Insectors, can end up with a free pop, but Insector Exobeetle is really a fun choice because, unlike the other cards in this pool, it's entirely generic. So, if you can make a rank 6, you have access to this pop as a tried and true form of interaction. So, Rhinocebus ended up being the perfect storm of easy to bring out, and strong enough to have an effect that can have a real impact on a duel, which led to its eventual success in Duel Links when used by the Insector strategies and even Gagaga decks that could flex into an Exobeetle to get this free pop. Now that we've discussed all of the digital bugs, is it fair to really call it a failed archetype? In this case, the answer is really unfortunate, and that's yes. Which is really sad because the concepts presented here are really fun. The XCs are the stars of the show, and the idea of switching between different ones and inherited effects to customize how you play in any given situation is really interesting, and clearly inspired decks that would come out later. What holds the deck back though aren't its payoffs. 2 out of the 3 XCs are real hits, but the main deck engine is just too tough to work with. Clearly the designers were worried about the decks because there's so many off-putting restrictions, and obviously clunky add-ons to these cards that make them awkward even before you start considering their potential activation conditions and setup that they need. Though, with that being said, some of these cards have some potential, and if backed up with future support that makes these cards easier to use and more searchable, there is a chance that Digital Bug actually enters the competitive metagame one day as a uniquely positioned insect deck with some good boss monsters to back it up.